Even one down the sideline, and he's got Cass over the top. Big down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network. What's up, guys? Will Decker here from the Bruin Bible. We had such a fun episode with Wayne Cook coming on, joining the Madman and myself for a fun kind of overview of some of the offseason moves. First time we've talked to Wayne in a while, so a lot to kind of get into with him. The transfer of KJ Wallace, the coming back of Keegan Jones and J.Michael Sturdivant, new D-line coach who's going to stand out next season. Lots of different topics. Going to be a lot of fun. What we got for you is we're sponsored by two very awesome companies, Bet Online and Underdog Fantasy. So much great things going on with both of these companies. Use code UCLA LAFB to get a match. Essentially, when you put in up to $500, they'll match you on these online betting services. When it comes to Underdog Fantasy, I am taking the Paul George 0.5 points. That is the only prop bet you can take tonight, where it's pretty much guaranteed money. 0.5 points. Paul George just has to hit a single free throw for you to cash in on that prop bet. So, guys, lock in. Use code UCLA LAFB on that, and you guys will be able to cash out how much ever you put down on a very, very safe bet. So, guys, we're going to dive into it. Bruin Bible on the way. Talk to you guys soon. What is up, Bruin Bible listeners and 1090 ESPN, the mightier listeners? Big episode for this Friday, as we got the former signal caller for UCLA football, Mr. Wayne Cook, in the house. Wayne, first and foremost, how are you doing leading into the weekend, my man?
I'm amazing. I am going through some football withdrawals. I had to reach out to you. I'm like, hey, Will, I got stuff to talk about, man. Can we do a show? So I appreciate you allowing me this opportunity to talk UCLA football.
Oh my gosh, anytime, man. Your invitation is always open to come on the Bible. We love having you. I'm excited to talk to you. We got some new transfers coming to UCLA. We got some guys returning, at the 12th hour, finally coming back and making a return. We got a guy that I thought was probably one of the most talented outside receivers in the country last year is coming back. Wade, you hosted the UCLA football banquet. And how many times have you done this up to this point?
Several years in a row now. I forget the count, but for most of the Chip Kelly era, which is a huge honor because I had never done. I've hosted stuff before, obviously, but I had never done like banquets and stuff like that. And the staff said, "We want you to do it," and trust me, I did the first time begrudgingly because I was like, "Oh gosh," because it's hard. It's hard. You're sitting there, you're staring at all the coaches, all their wives, the athletic director. You got the associate athletic directors, you got all the players, you got all the families, you got all that stuff. But I've been a part of this Chip Kelly family, and this is one thing I really want to emphasize. For a lot of the people that I think are guessing at what's happening in this program, there's a sense of team at UCLA, and all the years that I've covered UCLA football, and I love all the players I've covered for my 20-something years of covering UCLA football, but this group, whatever people think they see from the outside, is so tight-knit. The coaches really like each other. They've treated me as a former player and a broadcaster like I'm one of their own. And I just get to do so many cool things. And now I've done these banquets so many times that I stand up on the podium, Will, and I feel like I kind of forget that I'm hosting the banquet. I'm just talking about, like, giving a little speech on the things I loved about Mokiao-Atimalala this last year and how hard he worked, and talking about how greatness doesn't come from just talent. You have to put in the effort and how hard he works. And every coach, the athletic director, they're all like nodding their heads like, yeah. And it's just, it gives me an opportunity to give back, but it's fun. And I will, I want to say this about the Bruin Bible, Will. I'm there at the beginning. I'm always there early because I have to go up because there's a million names. If you saw my script, the first whole part of the show is saying thank you to pretty much everybody that it works at UCLA. I mean, it's insane. And there's a lot of names that I got to be honest with you, I don't know. And so I get there really early. I talk to the coaches. I talk to our guy, Ethan Young, Mr. Boom, every time we get a new recruit.
Yeah.
He went over a lot of the names with me. And like I said, the staff is great and they treat me so well. But then I get to talk to some of the people that show up, right? Because we have boosters and everybody there. And this is where I'm going to come back to the Bruin Bible. So many people will come up to me and say, every time I've been on this show, they'll say, hey, I saw you on the Bruin Bible. I saw you on the Bruin Bible. We talked about this and that. Trust me, it's reaching UCLA fans. And you guys do a great job. So I appreciate it because I get a ton of feedback every time I come on the show.
Well, man, that means a lot. And I know UCLA fans, we may differ in opinions sometimes, but I want you guys to know we care about this school, this program, and everything they've got going on there. And I hope we can give honest, factual reporting to you guys on what we think is going on there. So, Wayne, that means a lot coming from you in the banquet itself. Do you ever get nervous doing those things anymore?
Absolutely, I do. I don't get nervous doing this. This is when I can just sit and talk football, I'm actually get really excited. Like, I'm not going to lie and act like when I get nervous before UCLA football games, I get nervous because I want the team to do well. I get nervous. There's every once in a while, there's a few things that make me a little anxious. I hate it when the other team scores right before halftime. Like I can tell you every single one of those late half pick sixes kill me because now I'm like, I just wanted some positive momentum because it makes those halftime interviews with the coach. And by the way, Coach Kelly is great to me, but it makes it a lot easier when things are going well. I mean, it just makes my job so much easier. And to be honest with you, the coaches' interviews are always a little bit anxious. I don't get too nervous because Coach Kelly's great. Things like banquets, though, I do get anxious. One year, I was reading off all the coaches' names and their wives or girlfriends or fiancés or whatever, and I skipped Jerry Neuheisel. And they actually let me have it. They're like, "Hey, you forgot somebody." I think it was a couple of years ago. So I make sure I'm like right on with reading everybody's name so I don't screw them up. But it's nerve-wracking. But I will say this: like, I don't know if they released the award winners. But one of the best things about covering UCLA football is when I get to call up the coach to present the award, the players they'll give a speech, and if the players weren't there because some of our players are preparing for the NFL right now, so they couldn't be there. And we all know the schedule of college football now is so insane that when do you have the banquet? Okay, because it's hard to do it on recruiting weekends. It's hard to, you know what I mean? Like the transfer portal's open, players are getting ready for the NFL. It's like, when do you have it? And so, yeah, I mean, Latu had to leave before he got his MVP award. Yeah. But he was there. And his mom was still there, but he was there. But he had to go because he had to get on a plane because he was probably going to go train. And so, Ryan Cragen, Duke Clemens, Kenny Churchwell, Colson Lankoff, Darius Muasau. Wow, let me keep going here. Latu, obviously, Alex Johnson, what a great year he had, and Carl Jones. So when you get to think about those players, and all of those players, I believe that I just read are leaving. They did such an amazing job for UCLA this year, and every single one of them. And I want to reiterate this point again because I don't think everybody sees. There's always. Before I say what I'm about to say, I have to say this. When I played, even though I played under a head coach that has a statue right now outside of the Rose Bowl, he will always be the winningest coach. Jamal, what's up, buddy?
How's it going, Wayne? How are you? Great to have you.
It's great. I'm glad you made it. I was worried you weren't going to make it.
No. We got the wires crossed with the time, so
it's all good. But in the middle of what I was saying, I was going to point out that even though I played for the winningest coach in Pac-12 history, Pac-10 history, whatever, and he's got a statue outside the stadium, I promise you I still played with players that didn't agree with him. And usually it's because they're disgruntled because they didn't play as much as they thought they were going to play. Because they weren't maybe as good as, and to be honest with you, usually that's the case. They're not as good as they thought they were. And a lot of guys come in with all kinds of hype and they don't play. So anyway, back to the banquet and these players, almost every single one of them in their speech, they looked right at Coach Kelly and thanked him and said how great of an experience they had. They talked about the brothers on the team and who they played for. I talked to players like Keegan Jones, and I gave him a big old hug, and I'm like, dude, I'm so glad that your jersey wasn't one, because there was a lot of jerseys, you guys. And we scratched off a lot of guys at the banquet before the banquet started, the guys that are coming back. And I promise you, if we underestimate what Keegan Jones adds to this, defense as a linebacker to play with Oladejo and John Vaughns and the guys, I know we're losing Muasau, but Kenny Churchwell, like all these guys were like, thank you to their position coaches. Some of them play special teams too. They thank those coaches. I promise you this, the Ikaika Malloy defensive coordinator hire was a very, very popular hire. I had a great conversation with him before the banquet. Him and I actually played against each other when he was at Washington. And so we talked a little bit about that stuff, but we also just talked about, you guys, if you watched the game last night, Vita Vea, that's one of Ikaika's players. Gaines, remember the Vea and Gaines defensive line at Washington? I mean, Ikaika Malloy is a coach. I mean, I personally was hoping that he would get the nod, and that's not a knock to anybody else. I just thought he was a perfect hire. And I happen to know that I'm pretty sure every single one of the defensive linemen, are like the majority of them, that not the ends, the tackles. I mean, he looked me in the eye and said, we're going to be really strong on the inside.
I agree.
And that's exciting. So, like, again, I just wanted to emphasize, I feel like the culture that I see at the banquet, when I talk to players in the locker room, is solid. And you talked about it earlier, Will. The guys are coming back. Keegan's like, you know what? Maybe I should stay, because that offense is starting to look like it could be special next year.
It really does, man. And there's some pieces coming back that you're really excited about. I think the logical place we could start with after the banquet is Keegan Jones returning, because it was so ironic. He actually transferred to a Jim Mora program out in UConn, former UCLA coach. We knew him for close to a decade out here in Westwood. He has his moments, and it was a guy that I think was universally, felt by the fan base. This guy needs to be targeted more. He was making play after play. The Washington State game, Madman and I famously dubbed this the Keegan Jones game. 3 carries, 45 yards, and 2 touchdowns, kind of sealing the deal against a Cam Ward duel in that game. You saw the spin move, the hurdle he was doing against Oregon State and some of these opponents. It just felt like he never got enough touches to really make that impact. I thought there was a spot for him on special teams, given the track speed this guy has. We know what he was in the receiving game. He's been one of the best receiving backs when his number has been called within the Pac-12 the past 2 years. How big of a return is this, Wayne, to get Keegan Jones back and maybe pairing him with TJ Harden to be the new one to punch for UCLA next year?
Yes. First of all, I think we agree with this. I know the guys I broadcast with agree with this. We want Keegan to get more touches. I really think that this is almost funny to me, because UCLA was ranked in the 30s in total offense this year, like 30. So I forget what they ended up in the country, but it wasn't terrible, not by any stretch of the imagination. And let's be honest, when Ethan Garbers was the quarterback, this team, it seemed to be more people involved. And what I'm saying, when he played the majority of the snaps, it seemed like everything just functioned better. And so I think for players like Keegan Jones, I almost wish we could go back in time and just see what the season would look like if we could have kept Ethan healthy, if he'd have played the whole time. Because I think more people would have had better seasons. I know that even at the banquet, it was funny because I talked about how I thought the second quarter of the bowl game, which I got to hang out with my madman here a little bit, right behind me, and just heckled me the whole game. Sitting down there drinking whatever you were drinking, just loud, obnoxious. It was good stuff. I'm kidding. But it was funny because that second half, even Coach Kelly talking about that second half as a team, special teams, defense, offense. And remember, Lottie did not play in that game. I know the Murphys did, but who knows? We never know. The Murphys could. Is there a way you might get your draft grade and change your mind? You never know. I mean, never mind. I'm not going to go down there. They're probably gone. But either way, I thought that offense was and defense, and the whole team just looked really, really good. They look really, really good. And I saw splashes of that all year. Keegan just has always felt like he has that role. And I hate to do this because it's been so long now, but like the way that Chip utilized that kind of speed at Oregon, and we even saw Kazmir Allen at times. But I even think a lot of people were like, hey, maybe Kazmir deserves some more touches too. And that becomes tricky because, like, you got a lot of guys. We got J.Michael, we got, Ford, we got Logan Loya, we got a couple of really good tight ends, and Matavao and Habermill coming back. And Habermill's another name that I was glad to see was coming back because he could have left. Because he's grown in a way to where I know we lost a tight end, but those two tight ends are really good. They're really good. So I don't know. I just think that I think we're probably, I don't know what you guys think. I'm curious, actually. I actually think we should still be looking for another back. And I don't mean that to be bad but because there's so many guys, because when coaches leave, you get to jump into the portal. Like the rules don't, I'm pretty sure there's a rule on that. Like, because when some of the coaches are all over the place now, right? So I think that they may still be looking, and that doesn't mean that the guys that we have can't fill the void. But if you could go out and find like a Britton Brown type.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Sure.
I also think they may be looking for adding another lineman or so, just to get, for depth, or maybe to bring in someone that can start and you can shuffle around. Because we lose Duke and we get pretty much, most of the rest of the guys back. So either way, I'm so excited that Keegan made this decision. I think it's another example of the culture that UCLA has. And I definitely think, I'm sure the coaches were like, dude, we're going to, because now there's no Dante Moore, right? The Hasselbecks, the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state. I've actually watched film on him. I'm actually more excited about that pickup than if anybody's watching the NFL right now. Drop that quarterback, still win football games. Like, I hate to tell people this, like, you don't have to run a 4.2 to win football games in the NFL. Like you can still be, Jared Goff, who by the way played in a Super Bowl and now is winning for the Lions. It's like, yeah, but he's not fast enough. I'm like, okay. Should we bench him now and start someone faster next week? I like quarterbacks that distribute the ball and get everybody involved, because if you have great talent, just go back and think about what Joe Burrow did with LSU when they had all that talent. Do you really want a quarterback running around and trying to create stuff, but he can just throw the ball to those guys and let them do their thing? That's what I want. So either way, I think Keegan probably got some assurances that he'll be a little bit more involved. And I think the idea that Garbers, as far as I'm concerned, and I know there's a competition that's going to happen, but he's the starting quarterback next year. Like, going into the offseason, he's going to take the reins and take charge. And I think that's exciting for players like Keegan, because he will find him in the flat. He will find him out of the backfield. He will find him on screens, because the whole offense is fair play with Ethan.
Wayne, it's so interesting to sort of get your holistic perspective. And, I think Will and I completely agree. It's a breath of fresh air moving forward, especially with, some of the noise and the negativity with others. And we couldn't agree more. It really feels like there's momentum being built in a very mindful and intentional way. I mean, you talked about, and Will talked about, J.Michael and Keegan, and Holstege is back now. And so, you're getting all these guys coming back. To me, it feels like 2 more linemen, 2 more guys in the front 7, and to your point, maybe a running back with a little bit more power to complement kind of Harden's cutting ability and Keegan Jones's explosiveness. That's kind of the next 5, I would say, that the team needs to feel really good about themselves moving forward. How do you see that? What do you think are still kind of some of the missing puzzle pieces here?
I actually agree. I think right now, as constructed, considering what we've got back, I feel like on defense, because we've added a couple of defensive backs. I forget his name. The kid from Georgia Tech's actually a really good player. That was a big pickup. We're going to have, remember, I saw Devin Kirkwood at the banquet. And, players don't like to hear this because it's kind of like a compliment and put down at the same time. But I kind of was like, man, the second half of the season was really good for you, because I thought he came on strong. And so losing Humphrey doesn't quite hurt as bad, because you got Jalen Davies. You got guys that can play that have come in, and then we pick up a safety. So there's guys that can play. We also have some young linebackers. I'm real curious to see what some of those guys could do that we saw a little bit play this year. But every position you said, I feel right now, I feel like if we're weakest on defense, is probably going to be we were so good rushing the passer off the edge, like not just good, but like as good as almost anybody in the country. Like our pass rush was sick. We took a step back. When you lose the Murphys and you lose Latu, you kind of. But remember, you still got players like Shea Bryant Strother, who looks so good in the uniform and hasn't quite found his niche. And by the way, I should say this too: Carl Jones leaving hurts too. Yep. He joked around quite a bit about being a guy without a position, and he was laughing about how in the NFL he'll have to find a position again, because he's been everything from a safety to a defensive end. Linebacker, he's played every position. So, but I'm with you. I think we need a fun, and we did. We've already picked up a couple of pass rushers. We got the kid from Navy, and we got the guy from Miami who's young, who I think has a chance to be really good. But I probably think there's still a little bit of development involved there. So we'll see. So if we know anything about this coaching staff, guys, they're not done. There was a reason why we recruited the number that we recruited out of high school. They know that and if you have paid attention to the transfer portal, it's like ridiculous. Now, we all know that UCLA has to take that entire transfer portal. Like if you go look at it and you go look at all the 4 stars and the 3 stars, all these players that are really, really good, you're probably going to have to go about a quarter of that, maybe even smaller,
right?
To figure out which athletes fit what we need, fit our culture, because we've learned this about Coach Kelly, right? It seems like almost everybody he's brought in has fit the culture. And he talked about books and ball. I know people get sick of sayings like that, but that's real at UCLA. If you think that somehow UCLA is going to turn into a school that doesn't care about academics, you're crazy. And I hope you don't even want that. Okay, there's plenty of other places that do that. You can go be their fans. But at UCLA, we have student athletes. And if you listen to these players that are getting awards talk, they are definitely student athletes. They make me get up there going, how do I follow that? Because these guys are going to go crush it whether they play football or not. So, yeah, I don't think they're done yet. I think there's plenty of room. Jamal, you said it perfect. Like all those positions, I absolutely agree 100%.
Yeah. J.Mike coming back. This was the big announcement we got this morning. Wayne, Jamal, we talked about him all spring. I mean, when we saw this guy put on the pads in spring football, it was like watching the love child of Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson. It was something special to behold when J.Mike was on the practice field in the spring. I felt like he struggled with the 3 different quarterback carousel that was there. The offensive line didn't necessarily give him the time, because I felt like he is a deep threat at his best. I mean, just look at the numbers from the Boise State bowl game: 4 catches, 142 yards, and a touchdown in that game. He's a deep threat. The bubble screen don't really work for him as much as your shifty slot receiver.
Yeah.
He's got that long, lanky track star where he gets going at his fastest speed at 40 to 50 yards down the field. So if J.Mike coming back, he's got the chemistry with Garbers now. We saw what they did in the highest of high stages in the bowl game. What does this mean for the UCLA offense? Because I was excited about Harden. I'm super excited about Garbers. The confidence is there after the USC win, the Boise State win. You had J.Mike to this mix win. I think this offense, this 3-headed monster, can really give the Big Ten a run for their money in 2024.
So 100% agree. So it's funny because I follow both of you guys on social media, and it's I see the comparison sometimes to J.Mike flashing like JJ did, who I happened to throw to back in the day. I think it's a little unfair for J.Mike, because if you just go back and watch the 1993 season, JJ was, it didn't matter what throw it was, he was a danger to go to the house. But if you fast forward one year to 1994, I played, JJ got hurt, and Kevin Jordan was my All-American receiver that year. I don't know how many quarterbacks have done this, guys, but I have an All-American. My only 2 years I play, I had JJ 1 year and Kevin. Some people like to give them all the credit, but I like to take some of it to myself. But I had 2 great receivers. I actually think J-Mike's more like Kevin Jordan. Kevin Jordan was a great deep threat. He was a post just waiting to happen. He ran streaks. He was real fast, but ran great routes. JJ was way more physical. JJ, like, you could not, if you guys stood next to JJ like tomorrow, like, he makes me look small, and I'm 6'4". Like, he makes me look tiny, and his legs are like as big as my waist. Like, he's a big man. J-Mike's a big man too, but he's not that big. And JJ could laugh at you when you try to tackle him. He broke a ton of tackles. I think JJ's more like Kevin. Kevin ran great routes. Kevin actually had his 1994 season. He had more yards than JJ did. JJ had 17 touchdowns. Kevin only had 7 because JJ had that big play ability. He was always one missed tackle away from scoring. And that's why he was a Heisman Trophy final. I mean, he wasn't a finalist, but I think he finished like 7th. But Kevin was awesome. And I think, and what's great about this, Kevin Jordan is on this staff. And Kevin is the most humble person in the world. He doesn't like to talk about him as a player. But I think if J-Mike could learn to run routes, because Kevin was such a great deep threat that he probably caught, 50 curls and outs because DBs turned. And then he was always open. Like he'd get him to turn, and then he'd turn around, and I'd throw it to him, and it was easy. And then when they didn't turn, he'd run right by him. And so I think J-Mike has that kind of ability. And by the way, Kevin Jordan was a Playboy All-American. Like he was really, really good. And so I think that's who I would compare him to from my era.
Wayne, it's always so surreal when you talk about JJ in the 93 season, because that was the year in my youth that I fell in love with UCLA football. That's the first team I remember, is you and JJ going to the Rose Bowl. Beating SC in the Coliseum and going to the Rose Bowl. And so it's surreal for me at times when you're talking. So if I look like a deer in the headlights, I am.
Hey, Jamal, you know what? This is funny because I'm gonna say something that's totally revisionist history. But I started my sophomore year in 1992, and Kevin Jordan was this little freshman playing, and he actually played more than JJ Stokes did. And JJ was my very first touchdown pass. I threw a fade to him against Cal State Fullerton before I blew my knee out. But the guy in that game that came back to play with me, we were great friends with Sean LaChapelle. And I know I only played for a half, but I think Sean had like 6 or 7 catches. I mean, he was just going off. And I hope that UCLA fans remember how great he was. Like him and Tommy Maddox were really, really good. And I promise you this, I would have had 3 straight years of an All-American receiver because Sean LaChapelle was going to be an All-American that year. He got hurt too, just like I did, which kind of ruined that season. But man, when I see this goes back to when we talk about the receiving core. Remember last year, you guys, we talked about this. We were so excited about the receiver room.
Yeah.
And it didn't quite live up to expectations. But what's funny is, I mean, you guys, have we heard about Logan Loya? I was looking before we came. I'm assuming he's still on the team, right? I don't know. I think I called his name.
If we get Loya back, and with the potential of Ford and Sturdivant, to kind of piggyback off that point, Wayne,
the kid from Notre Dame.
Yeah, Flores.
Flores. I mean, we got
he's freshman too. I mean, huge upside.
And without the quarterback carousel, like you guys were talking about, that hurts receivers when you have 3 different. Because let's be honest, like Collin Schlee, I love him. I give him all kinds of credit for how great of an athlete he is, and that guy's ridiculous. He's just not the thrower of the other guys we had, and then the freshman that we had just was not even ready because he just really struggled reading defenses. But when we had the quarterback, it was better for everybody. I didn't think the offensive line was better. Because when you have a quarterback running the show the right way, it helps everybody. And I think these receivers probably would have had a better year with more continuity.
100%. Yeah. And the carousel is a big part of that. In Major League Baseball, certain pitchers have different catchers, like when they go out there. So you're rotating through 3 different guys. It's hard to build a chemistry, kind of a routine, with that. So I think if Garbers can stay healthy next year, knowing what we know, knowing that he was the best guy out of training camp, I think it was a lot of external factors that led to him starting, not starting last year. But getting Garbers as the guy day one, that's a relief for not only Garbers himself, but the entire receiving room, the entire offense, because they know who their leader is coming out there. I think you have to tab a guy and stick with a guy. I've never seen it work long-term in the NFL to have 2 guys, I think even with the Steve Young, Joe Montana situation, they had to choose, and they traded Joe Montana, which a lot of people hated at the time. My dad still hates it as a 49ers fan. It worked out. It was Steve Young. They had their guy. They chose the guy, and it worked out for them long-term. So I think with that, having their guy is going to be a big thing. I want to pivot now, Wayne, to the transfer that we got for the secondary. And I think this is a really underrated transfer. KJ Wallace, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. This is the second transfer we had this offseason with Notre Dame experience next to Rico Flores. This guy played a lot of snaps the last 2 years for Notre Dame and Tech. He's coming into a secondary that I do not think was talked about enough last year. And yes, Kamari Ramsey's gone. Humphreys is gone. Alex Johnson's gone, as well as DeAnton Lynn. But the secondary coach, I thought that did not get enough praise was Cody Whitfield last year. I thought he did a phenomenal job in developing these defensive backs. 2 of the top 5 PFF graded corners last year were with UCLA. And I think a large portion of that was due to Cody Whitfield. Getting just a veteran to kind of come in there and help stabilize that room after losing such valuable role players is so big for UCLA on so many levels. Talk to me about KJ Wallace coming in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's funny that you talk about Cody Whitfield because he did a phenomenal job. I'm pretty sure he was cornerback coach of the year. I think he got an award for it. Yeah. He's such a great young talent. His father played football against me at Stanford. It's kind of funny because his dad's an offensive lineman, and a great one at that. But he's got football in his blood. And if you pay attention to his personality, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to meet him. I mean, he is like absolute, I don't think I've ever seen him in a bad mood. He's always energetic, and he's one of those coaches that you just feel like he's just, when you see him have success, you're like, yeah, I'm not surprised by that. And so I'm pretty sure that is it what's the name again? Wallace?
KJ Wallace.
Okay, yeah. Played mostly nickel I'm pretty sure that's what they had him at, which is kind of funny because we're losing a guy that was one of the best players in the whole country at that position, and Alex Johnson, correct? Now that doesn't mean that he won't play corner, that he won't play, but in the world we live in, although it's going to be a little bit different, I think you might not have to play as much nickel in the pass happy Big Ten. Right? You might want to, which is funny because if you think about it, if you have Medrano and you have Oladejo, remember Oladejo had to come out a lot. We saw a lot of like Alex Johnson, and you saw a lot of just Muasau and Medrano. And I think having a thumper like Oladejo and the conference we're going to is going to be huge. But yeah, adding a player of that caliber, Georgia Tech had a great year this year for them. They really stepped it up, and he was one of their leaders on defense. So I thought that was a huge get. And I think, I don't know how everything's going. I know UCLA is getting a lot better at NIL. I know they're working really, really hard at getting better at NIL. But I still think we have to work for it. We have to find players that want to be academic, that want to come to school, that want to do both, and that the NIL may not be as much as maybe some people are offering, but it's enough when you combine it with UCLA and what the school has to offer. And so I think that's part of it. And I think the UCLA staff does a great job of selling it. But I still think we need maybe to be looking for another DB or two out there for depth reasons. But I think as we sit right now, as long as we stay healthy, I think we're solid.
Well, no, it's such a great point, and it's a really interesting segue you made to sort of my next question, and that's there's sort of two dimensions here in terms of development of this program moving forward. One obviously is personnel, and we've talked about a lot of instances here. The other is resources. You brought up the 3-letter word, Wayne, that not everyone loves, which is NIL, and obviously there's we've seen some programs have to deal with the peaks and the valleys of NIL, both from, a roster turnover standpoint to a culture standpoint. When you talk about the likes of a Texas A&M, for instance, and kind of mass exodus of players on both sides given promises, you talk about USC in terms of kind of Caleb Williams' almost alienation from the rest of his teammates and how that impacted culture. And you can kind of go on and on the list. But there's also sort of an element of kind of staff and coaching and sort of salaries associated with that. And I think for UCLA fans, I think there's been a recent sort of observation of teams and coaches that were sort of closely related to UCLA in the past. And that was sort of the Arizona and the Washington kind of move with Jed Fish. And I thought that was such an interesting juxtaposition because Jed Fish was at a university that was really struggling financially. The University of Arizona and the Arizona system was in pretty significant debt, and it looked like that wasn't really going to work out. And then you flip it to Washington, who obviously got a great coach in Kalen DeBoer, public university like UCLA. Now he, in 2 years, gone to Bama. You have this turnover, and now they turn around and essentially give double the salary. DeBoer was making $4.2 million. Now Jed Fish is making $7.75 million his first year. So you're seeing all of this volatility financially from a coaching standpoint as well as from a player standpoint. Wayne, how do you see UCLA in terms of resources, and where do you see kind of a gap maybe and where they can close the gap? But then B, where do you want them to be? Because there are just so many pitfalls with this as well. So would love to kind of get both dimensions of your take on that.
Wow. I mean, this is a 3-hour show that we just started. You guys, there's people out there right now, really, really good coaches that have been ultra successful. I just listened to a speech given by the Connecticut women's basketball coach, Oriyama.
Yeah.
And he talked about how, he gets it, but it's impossible to coach the way things are now. He says, I'm lucky at UConn because most people aren't going to look to go up from here because we're at the top. And he's being honest. But he says, now, how do you coach a player when they can just be like, screw you, I'm going to leave them? And they can transfer 3 or 4 times. How do you build camaraderie? How do you build character? How do you, and he's right. I mean, go find it if you haven't seen it. And he's done this over his career. He's really good at stuff like that. But Nick Saban's done it too. He was able to keep 5-star athletes on the bench, knowing that they're still going to get a chance to play down the road if they work for it, and that there's no shortcuts. And it feels like the shortcut is the thing now. And it's funny because, I was thinking about this, and my life's totally different. But many years ago, when I first got into broadcasting, I was a teacher, and I left teaching and I did full-time radio, and I was like, I'm going to move up. I'm going to eventually be on TV. I had all these aspirations, and then kind of life got in the way. And my first experience with full-time radio didn't work. And I went back to teaching. And it's funny because people have asked me, why don't you this? Why don't you this? Because I'm happy. I've got enough. I love doing UCLA football. I love being a teacher. I've been doing it for 25 years, and I don't need more. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm happy. My wife and I have the same schedule. We have enough money to go on vacations when we want to. We struggle sometimes with college and stuff for our kids, but I just feel like Jed Fish was the aw shucks guy at Arizona. He can't be the aw shucks guy anymore. He just looked at all his teammates say, hey, we just built something that was really awesome, and we possibly could have gone in and been the favorites to win the Big 12 next year, but screw you guys, I'm going to go take money. I know we live in a world where players are doing that now too, but to me, Kalen DeBoer, same thing. He built up Fresno State and said, see you later. And I get it going from Fresno State to Washington because, people do want to move up. But Washington's not that far below. I know Alabama's at the pinnacle, but remember, Alabama without Nick Saban hasn't always been Alabama. You got to go back a long ways. And I know Gene Stallings I think he had a championship, but for the most part, you got to go back to Bear Bryant. All these teams are a coaching change away if you have that elite coach from not being that anymore. I love the hire, by the way, for Arizona. Brent Brennan is a teammate of mine. He's a friend of mine. I absolutely love the guy, and I think he's going to do great at Arizona. And I already heard that he got Fafita to stay, possibly, and McMillan, and that's huge for them because what I would love to see is for Arizona with Brent Brennan to go be awesome next year, because Jed Fish may have to rebuild because they're losing a lot at Washington. So I don't know. This whole thing, I think UCLA has always had to deal with, even back when I played, you always have to deal with the academic standards. We had to deal with the fact that we were still winning when we didn't have the facilities that everybody had. And then we fell behind. Now we have the facilities. The Wasserman Center is really, really nice. And now we're kind of trying to catch up with NIL. And to be honest with you, and this is the part where I'm going to get myself in trouble because I'm not always about like, you know, I know everybody out there wants to go 12-0 and everybody always wants everybody fired and everybody always wants to move on. And like, you know, and again, there's pros and cons to a lot of this stuff. But UCLA has a couple of 8-win seasons and a 9-win season the last 3 years, correct? And we had and we've been getting better since COVID. And I know that we're not winning every game we should, but the fact of the matter is there's 2 or 3 games in each one of those seasons that could have gone our way. It's not like we're that far away. Now, next year's schedule is ridiculous. I was looking at it and I'm like, holy cow, do we really have, I mean, you guys saw it, right? Do we really have to play LSU, Oregon, and Penn State with 2 of those on the road, like back to back to back? Like, that's stupid, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I'm like, I'm like, oh my gosh. But I'm just telling you, it's like the program is in a better place. Players are wanting to stay. I know we've had a few transfers, but typically those are guys that aren't going to play. I know 2 of our defensive stars followed Dan Lynn to USC. I'm sure there was a good chunk of change involved there. But to be honest with you, we can bring in other guys that can do that. We can bring in other guys that can play. It's not like anybody's irreplaceable. But for the most part, other than that, most of the players that are leaving are looking for an opportunity to play when they're not going to play here. And I totally get that. I think that's good for the transfer portal. That's fine. Go do your thing. So I don't know, man. This money thing, it's frustrating. Sometimes I wish that we would just have a cap for everything, right?
Right.
Where coaches can only get so much money, players can only get so much, like for everything. Like you get this much, figure it out. Like, or something like that, because the coaches' salaries are just stupid. Because everybody says, well, how can you turn down getting 2 points? Well, you already had $4 million, and now you're going to get $7 million. You went from rich to richer. I get it. But where's the character part that all coaches preach? Where's the brotherhood? You can count on me. And we're losing it now. We're losing it from coaches, and we're losing it from players. So it's almost like it's just a bunch of mercenaries or hypocrites. Do we really believe what we're preaching? It makes me kind of sad because college sports is supposed to be something different. And remember, we always have to remind ourselves, at the end of the day, people forget this, and I've told you guys this on the show before. Once the coach and the players leave Arizona and Washington, those fans don't care about them anymore. They may say nice things like, hey, go be good, good luck. But for the most part, where do you think they're going to give their money? Are they going to give it to you? Or are they going to give it to the school or another player that comes in? People are giving money to the school because they want their school to win. I hope people never forget that. Fan bases root for their team. If you're there, they root for you. If you're gone, they won't root for you. And that's most people. I know there's a few people that are probably different than that. So I think sometimes people undervalue the value of the school's name. It matters a ton.
Yeah, man, that's a great point when it comes to what we need to do to kind of get back into the NIL space on a lot of different fronts, Wayne. I want to talk about the defensive line. We got a new D-line coach, Tony Washington, coming in from Oregon. I mean, anyone that Dan Lanning allows to kind of come into his defensive meetings. I mean, this guy was the D coordinator on those legendary Georgia teams, the one with Kirby Smart that won the national championship 2 years ago. This guy knows defense. So when anyone associated with him gets a big-time job, it makes me think, oh, this guy was one of his prized pupils, if you will. If he's already going to a D-line coach from a GA, it's a big jump. Big jump in salary, big jump in job position. And I guess this will be a two-part question. So what do you think about Tony Washington? And part two, what do you think about this new iteration of the defensive line? Because on paper, we're losing Latu, we're losing the Murphy twins.
Yeah.
How about this? We got Keanu Williams, Jay Toya on the interior, who are very solid players, and very, very talented edge rushers, and a champion, former top 100 recruit. People forget Grant Buckey was there in spring last year, man. This guy had offers from USC, flipped to UCLA. That always kind of makes your eyebrows raise as a UCLA fan. He also had offers from Michigan, Oregon, everyone within the Pac-12. These guys are young guns, and they're going to be very, very talented on the edge as well as in the interior.
So what makes it – so first of all, let's go back to the hire. I don't know enough about them, to be honest with you guys. Okay, so the idea that I like, how do I put this? I played for a very great coordinator. His name was Homer Smith. And Homer Smith, everywhere he went to Rose Bowls at UCLA. He went to Alabama my senior year. He left me, and I'll never forgive him for that. I'm just kidding. And with I forget who their coach. They won an SEC championship the first year he was there. Then he went and coached Keith Smith and Ortiz at Arizona, and they had one of the best. They were 12-1 and were like one of the best Arizona teams ever. Homer Smith was amazing. He was such a good coordinator that everybody under him followed his plan. And it really did, because there were some people. We had different line coaches a couple of times. We had Mike White. We had two or three, believe it or not, and they all did great. And so I'm not belittling position coaches because they matter a ton, but when you have a really good defensive coordinator, and by the way, ours coaches D-line. So what a great opportunity bringing a talented young, we just talked about Cody Whitfield, right? He's very, very young. He was a GA at UCLA a few years back. Now he's coach of the year at his position. So you have a young, talented person under Chip Kelly at the top and the way he sets up his culture and what he wants to do. And now you have Ikaika Malloy, who is bringing in a young coach at a position he knows very, very well. And if you go back and study the history of Malloy and what he's coached, he's had some dogs play for him. He's had some really, really good players. So I think it's a great hire. I think it's a great opportunity because I think he'll and by the way, he's got right behind him, he's got Ken Norton Jr., who's been coaching forever and has been very good everywhere he's been. I mean, Coach Norwood has been around for a long time. It's really, really, we didn't even talk about the other coaching hire that I love. I'll give you another banquet story. I was at the banquet and I've become friends with Coach Fuimaono. And if you guys have been following college football as long as I have, he was a hot commodity for a while at Navy. They were winning at a high level, and a lot of people, like when there were job openings that came up, they were like, "Hey, Coach Kent, like he's a dude." Well, we see each other on the sidelines all the time, and I talked to him, and I was teasing him about throwing passes to his tight ends at the bowl game because he coached. And he goes, "I'm not going to throw it. I'm going to get a GA to throw it." But he's the nicest guy. He's got the greatest character. He's proven to be a very, very good coach. He's a leader at best. And I get done with my first segment at the banquet. And before you came on, Jamal, I talked about I get a little nervous before stuff like banquets and stuff because everybody at school is basically staring at me. And I have to
Wayne, you nervous? No, I can't
right?
imagine that.
I'm trying to be Ryan Seacrest up in the front. And I get done and I walk over and Coach Ken says, "Hey, come here." And he looks at me and goes, "You're pretty good at this." And I just went, "Dude," I go, and I the rest of the day I was like a foot taller and I was just so much at ease. And that's just the little things that great coaches do. And by the way, are you guys noticing that a lot of our coaches, when they move on, are going on to bigger and better things?
Yeah. Coach
Kelly has proven that he hires good people. And so, and they're going on to get head coaching jobs and they're going on to do other things. And because we do the football that is being taught at UCLA, the development, and I know that there's people out there that don't like anything, but if you don't see the development of these players and they're how they're getting better and how, they're doing a great job. I know we're not winning as many games as you would. Trust me, guys. I want to win 10 plus games every year too. I promise you. I'm not happy with just getting to a bowl game. I know some people think I am, but I also am smart enough to know when I watch the team play that not throwing pick sixes against, Utah, that I'm seriously, and catching a touchdown pass, we win that game. The Oregon State game could have gone the other way really easy too. The Arizona game wasn't even out of hand. And I really think just sticking with Garbers in that game would have made a big difference. And again, that I know I'm questioning coaching there, but it's easy to do that, right? When you're in the midst of it and you say, "Man, I got these two thoroughbreds, if we use them both." I totally get that. It's easy to look after the fact and make comments. But the idea is that the last 3 years, even going back to the COVID year, there's so many games where I'm like, I still remember watching the Oregon game with
the pick six.
The one years ago where we had the pick six at the end of the half with Case. And we had that one. I mean, so we've been right there. And I know people want it to happen now. But who's to say next year's not that year where we win those games? where you have a senior quarterback. And didn't this year prove that having those 6/7, whatever, those ultra experienced quarterbacks, weren't they winning everywhere? We have it with talented receivers. And by the way, for the people that are knocking Coach Drevno too, remember he lost 3 starting NFL linemen before last year. That group's going to get better because of experience this year. So if they come together along with all the other guys we're talking about, we're going to be scoring quite a few points, I think.
Wayne, such a great point. I kind of want to close with a more holistic question. And we've talked about what does success look like for UCLA football moving forward. And I thought you brought up a great point. Are we satisfied with where we are? No, but we see light at the end of the tunnel. We understand that, hey, every third year, if we can sort of be in contention for a conference championship for more and sort of use those other 2 years to regenerate, regroup, and make a deep run, that's going to be a great place to be. I think the expansion of the playoff to 12 uniquely benefits UCLA. I think it was always going to be a challenge to be a top 4 team, just given admissions, given resources, just given everything that comes with UCLA.
For everybody, not just us.
And
the 4 team eliminated 94%, 5% of the country.
Exactly. And now when we're top 12, that seems very attainable. To your point, Wayne, last year, I mean, we're 2 DTR throws away from a top 10 finish. This year, you talked about the pick 6. If Garbers just starts against Arizona State and Cal, we're looking potentially at 10 or even 11 wins.
Yes.
So we're close. Yeah. If your time, early 90s, mid 90s, got to the Rose Bowl, Cade won 20 straight, got to a Rose Bowl, got to a Cotton Bowl. If that was, let's call it 10 out of 10 in terms of where the program is, where do you see the program right now from a scale of 1 to 10? And how close do you think it can be to get to a really, really high number?
Well, this is another awesome question. People weren't satisfied with, more people with Cade than mine, but even we didn't win every game. I mean, we lost by 1 to Nebraska. Like, oh, how could we, and they, that was Tommy Frazier in Nebraska. So who didn't lose to those guys? But we lost by 1, and it's not good enough. You get to a Rose Bowl, and Cade and I both were unlucky in those games and lost to Wisconsin. Both of us did, but we won Pac-10 championships. And I think people forget how hard that is to win conference championships. And the one thing I like about the 12-team playoff, and we talked about our schedule earlier, everybody's schedules are going to be more difficult next year. If you're a college football fan, I know that some people are getting a little frustrated with NIL and everybody moving all over the place and coaches not being loyal and all that stuff. But there's going to be teams that are losing a couple games that are still fighting to get to that 10, 11, 12 seed, you know what I mean? And because everybody's going to have to play really tough schedules. And so for me, I've always felt like UCLA, and we just answered this question. Going undefeated, when you look at some of the schedule we're going to have to play, I'm like, I live in a realistic world. I've always felt like UCLA, if it recruits the right way and gets everybody it's supposed to get, it has to stay healthy. It's always been that way. It was that way when I played. That 92 team I talked about with that was the John Barnes SC year. We were under 500. We were 5-6. But if everybody that was on that team, because if you go back and look at that roster, we were stacked. If everybody stayed healthy, I was like, my joke was there were 4 people, I forget who they were, but there were 4 people on the cover that year of the media guide. All 4 of them missed most of them. I mean, tons of games because everybody just got hurt. But if UCLA recruits right, and by the way, I'm talking about a lot of schools right now. And I think that with the transfer portal, even some of our elite schools were starting to learn that when they get some injuries, those 5 stars aren't hanging around.
Right.
They're taking NIL money and going somewhere else. There used to be only a handful of schools that could afford to have injuries because they got a 5-star guy sitting on the bench. UCLA could have some 5-star guys and 4-star guys that were playing, but if 1 or 2 of them got hurt at the wrong positions, it cost us. So I still think for UCLA, staying healthy is going to be a huge factor. But I think, we'll see what happens when we get into the Big Ten because that's kind of unknown. I look at the schedule and I see the Indianas and the Minnesotas. I'm like, yeah, we should win those games. And then I'm like, yeah, but those are pretty good teams. They're tough. They're not bad. So we're going to have to be really, really good. But my hope is, and it always will be this way, UCLA, for what it is, should compete for conference championships. They should have an opportunity at the end of the day, going into November, which is going to be totally different than it is out west, right? We're going to be going into some really nasty, cold weather, crazy environments, which is going to be kind of cool. But go into that late 3 or 4 games in the season where you're still sitting there going, we got a shot at this. And as you said, to be hovering in that 15 to 20 range in the top 20 with that shot of, man, if we can just get a couple of these games down the stretch, we're a playoff team. We're a playoff team. And the way college football has changed, there's more parity. Making that playoffs, you never know. You go steal a game, the opportunity's there. I never think UCLA should be happy with just being, a team that goes to a bowl game. We need to get 8 should be our floor. And then we should have those years every once in a while where we get 10 plus and we have a chance to play for something at the end of the year. That's what I expect. And then every once in a while, remember, Kate's team's won 20 in a row. And we all remember the Hurricane game, right? Like we all figured if we played them when we were supposed to, it would probably been a different outcome. That's possible. The Troy Aikman teams, as good as they were, number 1 in the nation, lost to Washington State on the road, couldn't beat SC, but that team won 20 games in 2 seasons. The Hunley teams won 10 games 2 years in a row.
Right.
When we've had really, really good quarterbacks at the school, you have a shot. And I think Gardner's is good enough. I know people want to make judgment, but people watched the year last year and are still saying that Dante was better. I'm like, according to what? The stars or what happened when they played?
Right.
Because when they played, it wasn't even close. And so, and by the way, that's not a knock. He's a young quarterback that might go on to be amazing. He might. I don't know, and I hope he does. But the idea is that right now we got a big time senior quarter coming back. We got a whole lot of players that are coming back. Okay, we got to fill in a couple. We're still working, right? The coaches are still out there recruiting and working. But what the heck? Let's go do it. Let's go win some games. And we need more confidence, though. I should say that we need more people that believe in this program. There's a lot of people out there that the only thing they know how to do is knock people down. This team has a ton of good athletes that deserve our support. And believe it or not, players are on social media in high school. And if all they see is people saying negative stuff or even making up stuff that's not true, that does not help the program. If your goal is to try to convince people not to come, then what are you doing? I don't want to be fake. I swear, I don't want to be fake because it sucks when we lose games. But at the same time, if you're gonna, let's lift this thing up because there are a lot of really good players on this team. And as you guys just pointed out, we've been real close. We just got to find a way to get over the hump.
Sage advice from Mr. Cook, and we're charting the waters unknown, as you said, but I'm liking the personnel we got more and more by the day this offseason. Wayne, thank you so much for coming on the Bruin Bible once again. It's always a blast to have you on here, buddy.
You guys are awesome. Listen, you can be positive and still critique things at the same time. And I know you guys do that really, really well. You try to stay as positive as you can, but sometimes you have to critique stuff because that's and for all the fans out there, I'm not trying to lecture. I never want people to think that. I'm really not. I'm not trying to lecture, but there was some nonsense that happens at times that I don't understand. I'm really I don't get it. So anyway, you guys are the best. I always appreciate it. Jamal, before you came on, people ask me every time I come on this, they're like, man, I saw you on the Bruin Bible.
Oh, and that's amazing.
I'm being honest. People say that to me all the time. I got it at the banquet. It's you guys are doing a great job. So keep up the good work. Okay.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Great words to hear. And thanks for managing my Indian Standard Time tonight. So I appreciate it.
I'm just glad you showed up, man. That's perfect. It's always more fun when we're all here.
Absolutely.
Always the best, man. Well, stay tuned. We got another show for you guys later this week. So make sure you're tuning into that. Off-season Bruins, we got you covered on that. We got basketball now on the Bruin Bible, which has been a lot of fun to start covering on that front. Stay tuned. We got it all coming your guys' way. We'll be back here at the end of the week. Don't go anywhere. Bruin Bible, we are officially